revenue that will be used in the future years of about $900,000 there, even though that balance is zero. It's an accounting issue where, again, we do have cash of about $900,000 there that is to be spent into 2023 and 24. So we can flip to the next slide and just look at where those resources are kept, I guess, just as far as their fund balance. We do note a small portion is non-spendable and restricted. And again, I think that non-spendable really should be hidden, but looking at the majority of those resources and those funds as being committed for those individual funds and not really available for use in anything other than those specific funds. So we flip and change to the capital project funds. Again, this is a big portion of where the city's funds are kept. But again, I think we can see here, I think that overall things are pretty strong with reserves for the future. I think the one thing that again sticks out here is the municipal building did go up about $5.5 million. I think it's important to note that that obviously is related to unspent proceeds, so more of a timing thing in 2023. Those proceeds will be spent, and the expectation is that fund will go back to, I suppose, similar to what it was in 2020 and 2021. So overall, I think really positive there. So if we flip to the next slide and just look at where those resources are, again, a majority of those resources are also committed, but there are also some assigned resources in some of those other funds as well. To the next slide and just look at the city's debt service funds. So again, this would be non-enterprise related debt service. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. I think this is just good information. We just show the total assets, remaining bonds or loans outstanding, the maturity date. And if we flip to the next slide, just looking at overall what that chart looks like in the next 10 years for the future principal and interest payments, kind of wavering between that 2 and 2.5 million range for future principal and interest payments in those governmental bonds. All right, so we switch gears a little bit. We'll get into the enterprise funds. So we have a number of charts related to the enterprise funds. There's going to be 2 for each. The first chart, we'll start with the water fund. Again, our charts, again, I'll mention just real quick, there's 2 charts. One is meant to be an operational chart looking at operating receipts in comparison to disbursements and debt payments. The second will be a comparison of the cash balance and present kind of a minimum target based on the funds, individual needs and uses. So as we look at the water fund, again, I think overall positive results where we do see that operating receipts or that orange bar in excess of the operating disbursements and debt payments. So if we flip to the next slide, we do see a really positive trend in the right direction for that water fund and the related cash balances, and just a little bit over the minimum targets there. Again, we do note some unspent proceeds there for future use on projects as well. So next is the sewer fund. Again, I think this one does not have, the sewer fund does not have debt, so we don't show that black bar, but overall I think really consistent good results for the sewer fund. Over the past 4 years, as that operating receipts line does exceed those disbursements. So if we flip to the next slide, again, I think it kind of is reflected in that next chart there where we do see a positive trend in the right direction of that sewer fund's cash balance over the past 4 years. The next would be the city's refuse fund. So again, we're going to see the same trends every time. I'm going to probably say it every time. And again, I think we see here overall operating receipts consistent to those disbursements. So if you flip to the next slide, I think overall this one also shows pretty positive, consistent results. Again, a little less need for future reserves with future capital or anything other than that in there. So we do drop that minimum target a little bit, and that balance is kind of staying pretty consistent to where that was over the past couple of years. Next would be the ambulance fund. Again, I think this one, that bar really consistent overall to the expenditures, so I think something to be considerate of in the future. I think the margin's a little tighter there in that fund. As we flip to the next one, I think there is a little bit of an increase in the cash balance above that minimum target balance of 25% of the operations. I think that's positive for that fund. I think a big reason for that was some of the grant funding and pushing some of the ARPA funding there. Oops. I can flip next to the License Bureau. Again, I think this one, again, as we do see, again, those operating disbursements kind of exceeding those operating receipts, probably not a surprise to the people in the room, but if we flip to the next chart there, I think we do see kind of that trend and just the impact of some of those things, and just obviously noting that will be something to continue to discuss in future years, that those costs do kind of exceed those receipts. All right, we're on to the last one, Pioneer Manor. As we see the same chart, looking at the cash flows from operations, we see pretty consistent, I think a little bit on the higher side for disbursements and debt payments in 2022. But if we flip to the next slide, again, I think we can see pretty positive results, and overall cash balance is really consistent, sticking around that 300,000 mark, and kind of above that minimum target operating costs in all 4 years. All right, the last one I'm going to go over the similar charts, as we do put together a chart similar for the internal service funds, looking at what a good minimum is there as well, and combining the insurance and employee expense fund. We see pretty positive and good results here. Some good reserves on hand, about 5.3 million there. Again, a little bit above that minimum target, but I think overall, obviously with employee costs going up, I think that's some good results there for those. All right, go ahead. You can actually go to the next one. Sorry, I forgot to prompt you. All right, so to tie it all together, we do put together a cash and investment balances, and we show where those funds are made up. A big portion of those, as I mentioned previously, would be in those capital funds. But again, I think a good solid split between the enterprise funds, the general fund, capital funds, special revenue, internal service, etc. So I think, again, as I mentioned, also just to reiterate here too, a big jump in that cash balance, mainly related to some of those unspent proceeds that will be used or are being used currently for some projects. All right, I will go next into the key performance indicators. Again, I'll just get some housekeeping. The Class 2 cities would be 20 to 100,000 in population, which would include all in the state of Minnesota. Cities in Ramsey County is self-explanatory, and 20 to 30,000 in population, I believe, is also the same. So as we look at, they're going to have 2 charts with taxes, 2 with debt, and we're going to close with some operational ones. But looking first at the tax rate, I think we can see overall the city's tax rate is really strong in comparison with those in the peer group, specifically with those, in the Class 2 cities. I think really positive and good results for the city there. So if we flip to the next slide, and just look at, a different ratio could be the same, could be very different. Obviously, we do just divide the overall taxes in total, divided by the number of residents within the city. So I think this one also is a good ratio for the city, showing on the lower side in comparison to those class cities and other comparisons. So the next one is the debt. As we look at long-term debt per capita, again, this one, I think, again, compares pretty favorably. I'm not entirely sure what happened there with the 20 to 30K in population. I don't think there's that many cities that are in that range in the state of Minnesota, so there could have been a big drop in one direction from one city or another. But I think overall, still a strong comparison with those cities. And again, I think obviously bigger cities having bigger debt loads is pretty normal. Next slide looks at the debt service expenditures as a percentage of current expenditures. So this one would exclude enterprise funds. So we just look at some of those governmental debts and just look at what that percentage is. I think this one also shows really consistent and good results to others in the member cities as well. A little bit of an increase over the past few years, but again, I think well in line with those those member cities and some of those other ratios. All right, so the last 2 look at the current expenditures and capital expenditures per capita. And again, I think to be a broken record, I think the city of White Bear Lake does compare really favorably looking at those ratios there, knowing that the operational per resident is about $611 in comparison to some of those others in the Class 2 cities, closer to $700. So I think that's really positive. And if we flip to the last one, I think this one is a little bit more inconsistent, just generally. Obviously, capital is a little bit all over the board with cities depending on need and what they're doing. But again, I think overall, when we mash all the numbers together, I think it all looks pretty good for the city as well. So with that, I've reached the end of my presentation. Applause, please. No. Does anybody have any questions?
Council, do we have any questions for the auditors? Well, people ponder that. I'll just thank you for the report and compliment Ms. Kinsvater for another good year of keeping the books in order. We've got a clean opinion, which is what we always want to see. So there was nothing glaring. And I know someone from your office contacted me a month or 2 ago and asked if I had any concerns, and I said no. So that was good. It was good. So thank you very much for everything you do in the finance department. Questions for the auditor? Seeing none, we have a resolution before us accepting the 2022 annual comprehensive financial report for the city of White Bear Lake. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The resolution passes. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks for having me. Good luck the rest of the year.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, items 6 through 9, we have nothing scheduled. Brings us to item 10, communications from the city manager. Ms. Crawford, do you have anything for us tonight?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just one quick update. As we did announce last week, Chief Swanson has submitted her notice of retirement in just 3 short months. So we did, which I'm thankful for the time that she has given. It could have been a couple weeks. So we anticipate going out for beginning the recruitment process very soon and looking to hopefully have a replacement on board by early September. That does still have to be blessed by the Civil Service Commission, which they meet on Friday. So right now we're in the process of reviewing the job description and creating the position profile. And I'm meeting with all of the police department employees to get feedback from them. So I just thought I would share an update on that, and that is all I have.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Crawford? Councilmember Jones.
Can I just add a thank you to Ms. Crawford for letting me play with fire trucks this last weekend? And kudos to assistant chiefs and police department and everybody. We took the 2 old fire trucks and put them in, restaged a 1933 photograph, and then brought the had drone going, and we then brought out the newest vehicle that we had and put it side by side with the old of France, and got some really cool shots to help celebrate the 135th anniversary of our fire department this year. So thank you. And it was just an awesome day. It was just unbelievable.
They didn't let you drive anything, did they?
No, of course not. I couldn't even touch it, so I was barely able to look.
Very good. Anything else for Ms. Crawford? Having nothing else on the agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? Do I have a second? All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.